Tuesday, January 5th, 2021, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Still feels weird saying 2021. I'll get used to it. Anyway, today we're going to look at how the dollar has been wiped out once before. And a lot of people might think, what are you talking about? I've never heard of that. Well, the reason people haven't heard about a lot of things to do with the monetary system, to do with money, is because the governmental authorities, the educational authorities, the press authorities, the economic academia authorities have been pushed to keep the subject out of the public realm ever since 1933, when President Roosevelt banned gold ownership, when he confiscated gold, and when the monetary system of the U.S. started going downhill. Why started? Well, because internationally still the dollar was backed by a certain amount of gold, redeemable at a fixed value. It was initially, of course, $20.67. Roosevelt revalued that to $35 on January 1st, 1934. So, for almost 100 years, people have been kind of kept in the dark about the monetary system. Fortunately for me, I've always had an interest and I've always dug deeper, mainly because I grew up in Brazil, where in the last 50, 60 years, we've had like different currencies, 4 or 5 different currencies, massive inflation. The present currency in Brazil, and by the way, I'm not in Brazil, I haven't lived there since the 80s, but the present currency is doing a little better. It survived about 25 years, but it's also rapidly depreciating. It was the worst performing currency last year of the major economic countries in terms of gold. I think it dropped from the beginning of 2019. I think you needed 6,000 reais to buy an ounce of gold. Today you need about 10,000. So the currency dropped quite a bit. I think, unfortunately, not just for Brazil, but for the whole world, we're going into a kind of currency collapse, or not kind, we are going into a currency collapse. I think what's going on nowadays politically and what we've been put into crisis-wise, like in the UK, we are under a third lockdown. I think in the US, it's not as clear. There's some states that are more draconian than others, of course. This is all to do with the change in the currency. And we're going to see how they do it and how they might do it. You never know how they plan to do it. I think what they're doing to us, keeping us locked down, is basically capital control. So they couldn't come out in the normal world and say, we're going to have capital controls. You won't be able to travel there and take your money, because that wouldn't sound like a free market. So they have had to come up with an excuse. That's my feeling of what's going on. So today I'm going to reference a great little book called The Triumph of Gold by Dr. Franz Pick. He wrote that back in the mid-80s, 1980s. Dr. Franz Pick was an interesting character. He died right after he finished writing the book, unfortunately. And he's got a lot of anecdotes, a lot of wisdom about currencies, about the economy. He was born in Austria, in the Austro-Hungarian Empire back in 1898. He eventually moved to the United States in 1940, I think just as the war was starting. He was Jewish, of course, so he's trying to escape Europe. But this is what he says here about the dollar, because you might think, when was the dollar wiped out before? Well, let's go to point 19 of the book, or page 35. I think you can find this book online on Amazon. And I checked, and it's like £84 they want for it, so it's quite expensive. I think it cost him cost $92 at the time. There is the price he charged. I don't know how much I paid for it. I bought it years ago, more than 10 years ago, this book. I surely didn't pay £84 for it. But all these kinds of books that are like jewels in the rough, so to speak, are worth quite a bit, I think. But you're going to get a little bit of a flavor about this book here. So the dollar was wiped out once before. So this is what he says. America's first currency exchange concerned the old continental dollar. The continental was first issued in 1775 with the promise of redemption in hard money, silver mostly at that time. The promised redemption never took place, and within 6 years, the quotation was 500 or 1,000 paper continentals for every Spanish milled silver dollar. So there's an old saying as well, it's not worth a continental, right? He says, finally, in 1789, Alexander Hamilton redeemed 100 continental dollars for one new dollar. The original issue was over $200 million. Less than $2 million was paid out in silver redemption. So you can see it was like 100 to 1. That's what they did. That's how they, trick the people. They only give 1% of the gold for the new currency, and I have a feeling that's going to be the same thing very soon. And that's why it's so important to keep an eye in the price of gold in the paper dollar, or the modern version of the continental, so to speak. The US government was the profiteer. This is what is happening all over again today. So this was written in 1986, and I've spoken about ever since 2007, or even a little bit before that. I was still in the city, so I wasn't doing what I'm doing today, telling the public what's going on. But I did write a few things, and I did put some stuff on the internet. And one of the things I said was that fiat currencies are all sinking. And you can see this article here I wrote in 2007, and nothing has changed. And one of the reasons why I knew about this is because of reading books like this. It wasn't because of what I learned at university about economics. It was because of what I learned myself, what I taught myself about economics and the monetary system way after I went to university. My degree is international relations with an emphasis in economics. It's a BA degree, not a master's. My professor at university in Switzerland wanted me to do a master's, but I wanted to go to work. I didn't want to keep studying. Now let's see, he's got an example of how countries have done this in the past when they basically destroy the currency and they bring in a new one. This could be kind of a roadmap to what we're going to see, even though, as I said, you never know how they're going to do it. But he's got an example of Brazil, and it's on point 24 or page 41. And he says, I was in Brazil in 1967. Well, I was there too, but I was only about 2 or 3 years old at the time, when the Cruzeiro was changed over. It was 1,000 old Cruzeiros for one new one. In Germany in 1924, 1 trillion paper marks were exchanged for 1 Reichsmark. In Hungary, it was 400 quintillion paper pengo for 1 new forint in August 1946. Nothing has changed today. Argentina already exchanged 100 to 1 in January 1970, then 10,000 to 1 in June 1983. In mid-1985, another 10,000 to 1 was exchanged, and the name of the currency was changed to the Austral. Here in America, I cannot say whether the currency will be exchanged at 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1. It will depend on under the table political deals, which I cannot predict. But this much is certain: the dollar is doomed. As I have said, the dollar is now a pitiful 3 pennies of its value from 1940, or of its 1940 value. And this was in 1986. So it's only getting worse. One day it will have to crash, as will every unbacked currency which puts its trust solely in God. Yeah, I guess he's referring to the "In God We Trust" motto on the Federal Reserve note. So notice how he says every unbacked currency. So we don't have backed currencies. What do backed currencies mean? Because you can still go out there with your euros, with your Aussie dollars, Canadian dollars, even Brazilian real, or British pound, or US dollar, and buy gold. But it doesn't mean, or silver, it doesn't mean it's backed by it. What it means to be backed by is that you can always take the same amount of promissory note and get the same amount of gold or silver, and it never changes. It's redeemable in a fixed value, and you should be able to do it at a bank, and you can't do it anymore. You have to go to a bullion dealer, right? So that's what he means. And believe me, there is no currency out there that is backed anymore. The Chinese, of course, there's been a lot of stories recently of a digital Chinese currency of a yuan. I think if they do come out with one of those, with a new currency, a digital currency, and I've heard that they're thinking about it because they're also trying to create this economic zone, the One Belt, One Road throughout Eurasia and Africa. I think they'd have to back it by gold, and that's why I think the Chinese and the Russians have been accumulating a lot of gold. So yeah, I would expect the digital Chinese currency to have some kind of fixed gold backing. It wouldn't be though for us, for the consumer in Asia or Europe. It would be in terms of international trade, much like during the Bretton Woods system until 1971. So, for example, if Uzbekistan has a surplus with China, they for a year of trade, they will take those Chinese digital dollars and exchange them for gold at a fixed rate, and China will do it. So that's where I think we're going. I think the Chinese know about these things. They're not silly. And what about America? I think they'd have to follow. Of course, the United States is still the biggest economy in the world. The US dollar is still the major reserve currency, but I think that's changing very quickly. And unfortunately, in the last 12 months, China has caught up quite a bit economically because they don't seem to be as much or heavily affected by the crisis in 2020. And it looks like 2021 is starting even worse than 2020. And why do I say that? Well, because back in January, beginning of January 2020, we weren't in a lockdown here in the UK. People weren't talking about all these things that could happen. So it was only in March. So unfortunately, I think this crisis is going to keep going on for a while longer. And it could be years. I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm just trying to be realistic. These things don't go away very quickly, I think, especially crisis where the powers that be are involved in managing it, if you know what I mean. It's the same thing like that happened during World War I. I've read a lot of books and stories about World War I when it broke out in 1914, towards the end of the summer, or in the summer. I think it was in the summer, I'm not sure. But everyone was saying, oh, the war will be over by Christmas, meaning Christmas 1914. And it was still going on in 1918, right? So unfortunately, I think this is going to keep going. We need to be aware of what's going on. So that's what I'm here trying to do, try to help people with the monetary aspect, financial, economic aspect of what's going on. And Yes, let's go through a few more things that Mr. Pick said here in his book. He has some really interesting stories. Let's have a look. Okay, this is page 19.4 or bullet point 4. I don't think they used that term back in 1986. It says Volcker has not eradicated inflation. He has simply bought a little time. There you go. Only fools believe the current remission from inflation is permanent. When I was a child in Bohemia, my father took an endowment policy. There you go. That would see me through 4 years in university. Just 15 years later, the insurance company paid me off in full with paper currency. That barely covered the cost of my first 2 meals in university. So I speak from personal knowledge. I lived through the destruction of the Czech koruna, the German mark, the French franc. Always there were periods of time in which inflation slowed or stopped. Always inflation came back worse than ever. I see that happening here. So with this slowdown, Volcker has not eradicated inflation, nor has any of the other Fed chairman or Fed chairwomen as well since Volcker, I would say. He has simply bought a little more time. The dollar will be wiped out. We have had constant creeping inflation for the dollar since 1940 because the dollar was the kingpin of the world's monetary system. Like venereal disease, it is infected all the other currencies of the world. Soon we too will go through the ringer. I only hope I am no longer here. I am too old and tired for such a crisis. So there you go. He is no longer here, of course. So with that, now let's look at where the markets are this morning. It's 10 to 9 a.m. Yes, yesterday was a good day for the precious metals. The precious metals rallied even further after I made my video. Silver kind of lost a little bit of ground relative to gold towards the end of the day. It still outperformed gold though. Right now we've got gold at 1941. It's down just over $1. The high's been 1946 and the low's been 1934. Silver's at 27.29, up about 8 cents. Low's been 26.97 and the high 27.48. I saw the stock market didn't do very well yesterday. I think the Dow dropped around 350 points. It was down a lot more during the day, but it rallied back up. Right now, the Dow is basically unchanged. The Dow futures, so is the S&P and the NASDAQ. Maybe it will have changed once you watch this video, because I have to record it first, of course, publish it. The currencies, British pound is down 0.1%, 135.50. A pound dropped over 100 pips yesterday, so almost 1%. So the pound is coming back down. I think 135 will be a key support there. The euro is up almost 0.2% at 122.71. Dollar is down 0.2 versus the Japanese yen at 102.93. And a currency that I think we should keep a close eye on right now, even though it's not a currency that we look at too much, is the yuan. The yuan is continuing to rise, or the dollar is continuing to drop. The low overnight has been 641. So you can see how the break of that 650 has really accelerated the move lower. That's a bad sign for the dollar. Right now, though, we are at 644.85. Crude oil has come back a little bit. I think we were around 49.25 yesterday. Right now we're 47.70. And to finish off, the bond market, which we're keeping a close eye on, the 10-year yield is at 0.93. So yes, normally with the stock market weakness we saw yesterday, we would have expected the yield to drop a bit more. So right now, there's no problem here, but we're going to keep an eye on it. It's up 1.3 basis points, as I said, at 0.93%. So there you go. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Parler, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.